I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, we can.
Great.
Looks like you need more people. You haven't put your chairs out yet.
No, we have a quorum though. There's,
Okay, wonderful.
four
I don't
of
know if
us
I do yet. I'm gonna do a little roll call here and figure out who's who and what's what, and we'll go from there. So, I'm Michael Cook. I'm the chair of the West Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committee. This is a joint meeting of May 14th. And we have the East Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committee meeting remotely from us in Cortez. And I'm gonna go around the room and see if we have a quorum for West Turlock. So, Glenn, do you want to start with you?
Maldonado, ICWD.
I'm Isabella Cardenas. I'm just here to see the meeting.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Joanna Sharametsa, just here to see what's going on.
Chris Johannan, I'm with the East Stanislaus Resource Conservation District.
Welcome.
David Odom with Daenerys CSD.
Juan Ochoa with the City of Modesto.
Michael Clipper, TID.
Mike Pitcock, City of Waterford for Hickman.
And again, I'm Michael Cook with Turlock Irrigation District, and Cynthia, you want to introduce yourself?
Cynthia Calderon, TID.
So we need, for West Turlock, we need 7 members to make a quorum. We have people online that I don't see. No, we have only 5 members right now. Hi, good afternoon. City of Houston, we're 6 now. Welcome. And we'll keep going through the agenda, but West Turlock won't take any action until we get to a quorum. Okay,
Michael, we can probably help you. We have Christy over here. So you
Christy.
may- Yeah.
wonderful. Okay. Christy. Thanks for being here, Christy. Okay. So with that, I'll call the West Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committee to order. Sarah, you want to do the same on your side?
Of course, yeah. Let me go around the room of here in Cortez, who's here. I'll start with Mike Titza,
Mike Keats is here.
Sarah Wolf, East Side Water District,
Jenna Sheltuya, Political Cortez.
Ashley Sharon Gonzalez, Merced County. Christy McKinnon, Stanislaus County.
So we have a quorum, and actually, Michael, I should have mentioned Ashley was here too, so you're another person up. So we call to order the East Turlock GSA.
Wonderful. Okay, with that, we'll move to item number 3, public participation. This is the time set aside for members of the public to directly address the Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committees on any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Technical Advisory Committee. So general participation now, and we also have items on the agenda. You can speak now on any item or hold that until the item is full. Do we have any public participation at this time? Okay, hearing none, we'll move forward to the first action item, which is the meeting minutes. This is the meeting minutes of the April 16th, 2024 special joint meeting of the West Turlock and East Turlock Subbasin Technical Advisory Committees. The minutes were mailed around earlier this week. And so West Turlock, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of April 16th?
A motion.
A motion from Juan,
Second.
second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, so the minutes of the special meeting of April 16th are approved. Over to you, Sarah, for the East Turlock.
Do we need to approve the same minutes from ETS GSA for April 16th? Can I get a motion? Thank you, Dennis. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Ashley. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So moving on to item number 5, budget update. And this is overview of revenues and expenditures for the West Turlock and East Turlock GSA. So we'll start with Michael Clipper. Over to you, Michael.
Okay, for the West Turlock account, ending April 30th, we had $1,176,659.83. For the basin, we had $791,086.49. And there will be kind of a true up with some of these invoices and everything probably in the next month to 2. We'll have a good accounting come probably July 1.
Sounds good, Michael. Thank you for that. Any questions for Michael? Okay, Sarah, over to you for a budget update.
Thank you. I don't have, again, I didn't last month either, but this month I also do not have our account balances, but we are getting ready to send out our assessment on the new Prop 218 that we just passed. So we're doing a retroactive assessment for the 24 year. And then we will start on the adoption of the new budget in June and July. We will send out the assessments for next year. So moving forward with our new Prop 218 will be very beneficial for us.
Okay,
That's all I
sounds
have.
good. Thank you, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah? Okay, moving to item B, this is an informational update and discussion on the projected budget for next year for the West Turlock Technical Advisory Committee. Does everybody have one of these? These were sent around earlier in the week. Did you miss send around now? Okay. So our budget has to be adopted by July 1st of every year. And my plan is to bring this back to you guys on June 11th for formal approval. So it's a preliminary budget at this time. And ordinarily Debbie works on this stuff, as you know, she retired, so I'm playing catch up. And I did, at the board meeting last Thursday, I did mention to them that the budget would be a little bit late this year. The plan to go to them on July 11th, when they work on the updated or revised groundwater sustainability plan. But I put this together based on information I got from our consultants and in coordination with Mike Tietza at the East Turlock Subbasin GSA. I kind of wanted to wait a little bit to put the budget together because as we're revising the GSP, there are things we're gonna have to work on next year that we haven't worked on in the past. Yet on the other hand, because we won't be spending a lot of money with the consultants, hopefully on revising the GSP, we're saving that money. So money we're spending this year, we won't be spending next year, but we have to reprogram that for other activities related to the implementation of the GSP. So what I've been able to do is effectively hold the budget the same next year as it is this year. The big projects we will, apart from our normal stuff like annual reports, water level monitoring, that type of thing, there's probably two things we will be working on next year. We've been developing a capital reserve to put in a number of monitoring wells, which we have to do as part of the GSP. So starting later this summer, we'll start bidding the monitoring wells, the river wells, all that stuff. That'll get us into compliance with our data gaps that are noted in the current GSP. We'll also be moving to a domestic well or drinking water well mitigation plan. That's one of the deficiencies that DWR pointed out in our GSP, that they want to know what are the impacts going to be going forward of our management actions on domestic wells. And if domestic wells are going dry, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to mitigate that? And so you see I've programmed some money in there somewhere to, let's see, drinking well more mitigation. So about the third row down, programmed about $100,000 for us to work on, one, finish up the plan, and two, set some money aside if we do have to mitigate impacts of domestic wells, like drill a deeper well, replace the pump, whatever it is, we can do that. Now, Liz is going to talk about this later. We still haven't developed our plan yet, but I felt it was important to just program some money that should our plan involve mitigation costs, we have the money there to do it. And also we can show to DWR that we're serious about domestic well mitigation by the fact we programmed some money already. So again, bigger picture stepping back, I think it's very important that we put together a strong revised GSP that DWR is going to approve, because we don't want to go down an alternative path. And so programming money, putting some programs together that show we're working on these issues, I think they're going to appreciate the sense I get, and will put us in a position to get that GSP review approved. And as we go forward, we'll figure out how we're going to implement this and what the true costs are going to be. Okay, so I've spoken quite a bit. You've seen the preliminary budget. Do you have any questions from me? And again, it's kind of in two halves. So a lot of these things we work on together with the East Turlock folks. So the top half is things we work on together and kind of our proportional share. And the lower half is the things that we'll be working on independently, as well as our normal $100,000 a year that we have in legal and admin costs just for operating the West Turlock GSA. Mike.
I have a comment. So on the well installation, I know there was a discussion early on about putting a well in the Hickman area. So I have a couple different locations. You can consider doing that if that's going to be one that you're interested in doing
Fantastic.
in the next couple of years. So one is kind of in the middle of Hickman, and the other is along the river itself. We have a large piece of property with some drying beds, but we can get quite a ways away from the drying beds if necessary to
Fantastic.
get a very clean look at the groundwater table.
Wonderful. And a late fall of last year, Mike Neby, who works with me, reached out to a number of you, and if you had, public land available, we could look at monitoring wells, and most of you got back to me. So we'll pick up that work, later this summer. So thanks for that. Any questions on the budget?
Just the grant application, I mean, is there certain things that the basin would pursue? To me, that seems just kind of a little bit, kind of light, 35,000 for.
That's to pay the consultant to help us write the grant.
Right.
That's typically been the costs in
Is
the
it?
past.
Okay,
And again, there has been implementation money in the past.
okay.
So like, for example, domestic well mitigation, ideally we get a grant to help us pay for that work, right? But if it's not there, it's not there, but to fund it ourselves. So it's kind of, a little bit of this is just opportunity money, like put in the budget and see if those opportunities are there. Anybody else?
So then I'm working on a grant application for a storage tank in both Hickman and Waterford. And one of the reasons for the one in Waterford, it's right adjacent to the MID and City Modesto River surface water project or pipeline. So we're going to be reaching out to Modesto in the future to try to come up with some sort of a game plan to tie into that. That is part of the GSP as a plan. So we
Right.
want to try to move that ahead.
That'd be great. So it would provide surface water maybe to Waterford and Hickman?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Because we have two grants. One grant is actually to tie Waterford and Hickman together. Right now, we've gotten through the bridge. It's on the south side of the river. We just need to take it into Hickman and reroute some pipelines in Hickman. But yeah, it'll be able to bring water from whether it's the ground or the surface water and be shared with both Hickman and Waterford.
Great. Very good.
One more thing, Mike. So
One.
the stuff that Liz is working on as far as having an update to DWR as far as the projects to be more descriptive as to how they're gonna reduce the deficit. Is that something that we're gonna start implementing right away without having an approved GSP? And is that something that will be reflected in the budget at some point, or?
But so most of a lot of the projects are taken on by the individual agencies, right? So it's not a GSA cost. So
Okay.
like Mike's talking about what he's doing in Waterford and Hickman, they're
Okay,
funded by those guys. The same thing, the TID projects, the Turlock and Series at the SRWA project, that's a big one. They funded that themselves.
but like, let's say as a basin of, to help for grant or whatever, that's not something that would be on an individual basis.
Yes, if we apply for a grant on behalf of the GSA, we
Okay.
pay for that. But if like the city of Modesto is pursuing a grant,
That's
they fund it themselves.
Okay.
What we're trying to do is utilize the GSP as another reason why we should be given the grant is we have an approved, well, it's not approved yet, but hopefully at some point to be approved document that's basically outlining that this is one of the projects that's outlined as going to help bring the groundwater into stability.
All right, so I'll bring this back for action on July 11th and get that to the board on June 11th. Yeah, so this is Tuesday, Thursday, we say 30 days. Okay, and then yeah, so that's good. And then Clipper motioned to me that he's like, hey, how come we got different numbers at the bottom? So I showed you last year and this year, and they're not exactly the same, and I just made it as accurate as I could, but I think it works. Thanks, Clipper, for bringing that up.
Thanks.
Look at that, $3,000 less. Spend it all at once. Yeah, all right. Okay. So with that, we'll close number 5, moving to number 6. This is kind of the main event. So this is a presentation by Todd, Groundwater and Water Current on the status, the revisions to the groundwater plan and the well impact analysis, project management actions and schedules. So with that, Liz, we'll hand over to you.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen clearly and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining this afternoon. My name is Liz Elliott with Todd Groundwater. And we are going to give you an update on where we're at with the revised GSP. So last time we met last month, we provided you with an overview of our well impacts analysis methodology. And so today we're going to talk about some of the results that we have to share with you. And after I go through that, I'm actually going to pass it off to Dominic at Woodard & Curran, and he and Andres will be presenting on the projects and management action work that they have been doing. And then when we are done with this agenda item, the GSP revisions, we will continue with agenda item number 7, the domestic well mitigation plan. So hopping into the well impacts analysis. So if you remember, there are 2 corrective actions in DWR's determination letter. And the first one basically says that since groundwater levels are going to be lowered from the MT to the 2027 IMs, where the 2027 IMs are below the MTs, what effect might this have on beneficial uses and users of groundwater? And one of the things that they ask for is a well impacts analysis. So the goal of this well impacts analysis is to try to estimate how many wells may go dry if groundwater elevations decline below the MT to the 2027 IM, where the 2027 IMs are defined below the MT. So just as a reminder, the 2027 interim milestones are defined for almost all of the representative monitoring wells within the Eastern Principal Aquifer and a handful of wells in the Western Principal Aquifers. There are 3 in the Western Upper and 1 in the Western Lower. So what's the methodology? The first thing that we did was we compiled a database of water supply wells with construction information. This included all water supply wells, domestic, agricultural, municipal, and industrial. We reviewed the known well construction, and then we spatially related these wells to the nearest representative monitoring well in each principal aquifer. And from there, we were able to compare the minimum thresholds and the interim milestones at the RMW to the different wells in the database within that grouping. This is a map of the representative monitoring well locations. All of the blue dots are representative monitoring wells in the chronic lowering of groundwater levels monitoring network. And the blue dots that have green halos are the ones that have 2027 interim milestones that are below the minimum thresholds. So as you can see, as I said, most of them are in the Eastern Principal Aquifer, the ones with 2027 IMs below the MTs, but there are 4 in the Western Principal Aquifers. So we compiled well data with construction information, and we were able to compile information for about 7,800 wells that had construction information, and those are shown as all little dots on this map. The information came from several sources. The first was our GSP data management system that we developed during GSP development. The second source was well information that we acquired during the recent model updates over the last few years for the annual reports. And the third source, and by far the largest source of information, is DWR's online well completion report database. So the first step in this analysis was to try to estimate how many wells would be projected dry at the minimum threshold. And a well would be considered dry if the depth to the minimum threshold is below the total depth of the well, which is why we have only used wells with construction information. We need to know construction information, the total depth of the well, in order to do this analysis. And what our analysis found was that at the MT level, a little over 200 wells with construction went dry. And just as a reminder, the MT is the low 2015 water level. And those wells that are considered dry at that level are shown as these black dots on this map. And you can see most of them are within the Eastern Principal Aquifer, although there are a few in the Western Principal Aquifers. So this number, a little over 200 out of about 7,800 wells is about 2.7% of all the wells that we had information for with construction would have gone dry at the minimum threshold level. The next step in the analysis was to look at what wells would be projected to be dry at the interim milestone. Similar to the MT analysis, a well would be considered dry if the depth to the IM is below the total depth of the well. So what this analysis is asking is if groundwater elevations are lowered from the MT to the IM, where the IM is below the MT, how many more wells would have gone dry? And the estimate based on this analysis is that 85 additional wells are at risk of being dry. And those are shown as the black dots. 85 out of 7,800 wells in this analysis is about 1.1%, which is based on our experience in doing similar analyses in other subbasins, is a very low percentage. Most of these wells, most of the 81 out of 85 are in the Eastern Principal Aquifer. Oh, I should also note that there are not 85 dots on this map, as you can probably tell. The reason for that is that the well locations from the GWR's OSCAR database are commonly the center of the section. And so there are many of these black dot locations represent more than one well location because there are a lot of wells at similar locations since it's center of section. So what are the attributes of these at-risk wells, these 85 wells? Well, thankfully, the well age is known for most of them, 75 out of 85 of these impacted wells. And in general, what we're seeing is that these potentially impacted wells are both older and shallower than average. So the average age for all of the wells in this analysis for the 7,800 wells is 32 years. But for those 85 that were impacted at the IM, it's 49. The average depth for all of the wells in this analysis is about 230 feet, but the average depth for those that are impacted are much shallower, about 140 feet. So again, the ones that are most vulnerable to becoming dry at the IM are older and shallower than the average. There are limitations to this analysis. Like, as I said, this analysis is limited to wells with construction information. There are records of wells in DWR's OSCAR database that don't include construction information. We weren't able to use these because there's no way of comparing depths and elevations of MTs with total depths of the wells. There's also, like I said, some uncertainty associated with well location, since many of the wells in OSCAR's database are located in center of section. We don't know exactly where within that section that well is located. In many cases, we don't know what the status is of these wells, right? We are using all records of well completion of well drilling and construction. If a well was constructed in 1965, we have to assume that it's still active. But of course, we understand that it may not be, but we just don't know that it's not active. So we have to be conservative and we have to assume that it is. So this estimate is a conservative estimate, assuming that all wells with records are active. There's also some uncertainty associated with well types. So well types that are indicated on logs when they're constructed, such as domestic, municipal, or irrigation, industrial, ag, they can be incorrect, or they could change over time. So we don't know what the current use of that well is today. We have to, depend on the well record that we get from DWR. So I believe that is my last slide. Yeah. So before I hand off to Dominic to talk about projects and management actions, do you have any questions about this analysis?
Questions for Liz? Overly conservative, probably. Yeah, on the other hand, we looked at the well construction depth, so some wells can actually stop working before they get to the bottom of the well too, right? So
Yeah, that's the bowls or the pumps aren't at the bottom of the well.
right, exactly. So there's that mitigating fact too. So very comprehensive, Liz, thanks for that. And again, you looked at every type of well, and I think when we get to the next section, we talk about well mitigation. we'll talk about what type of wells we may or may not mitigate for. Is it all wells or just domestic wells or drinking water wells or whatever else? So again, thank you for that. Any questions in Belico for Liz?
Nope, I think we're good.
All right. Thank you, Liz. We'll see you in a little bit. Dominic. Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Dominic, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just give me 1 second to get the presentation shared with you.
Yep, we can see it.
Awesome. Andres, do you mind go toss me off to the next slide? Awesome. So thank you everyone for joining us. We're hoping to go over a couple quick slides with you, really to focus on some of the projects and management actions as part of the revised GSP. One of the major efforts that we're going through is to basically talk through in a little bit additional detail to show DWR, the basin's commitment to sustainability. And so as part of that, our goal is to, revise and compile a lot of the projects management actions that we have with a couple little twists that we're going to show with you today. And then eventually I'd like to take the second half of this conversation to be able to show you some of the modeling that we've done, some of the impacts that some of the proposed projects and management actions will have on the basin sustainability, and kind of give you an idea of where we're going in the future. So next slide, please. So really just to set the stage, one of the first major things that I want to preface this presentation with is kind of give you a quick overview of really what are the projects and management actions for, as well, what does it say in the regs? And so I don't want to get into this too much, but basically the overall arcing regulatory framework of this is that the GSP must include a description of projects and management actions that will bring the basin into sustainability. That not only do we need a simple list of those projects and management actions, but we need to be able to look at if there are any interim milestones, schedules, funding sources, look how these projects and management actions, how they are going to be implemented, what eventually will be the ultimate impact, right? Positive or negative, throughout the basin. And so our goal is to be able to not only capture all the plethora of information that the GSAs have provided to us, but then to be able to put that into our IWFM model and, be able to simulate and estimate really what are the long-term yields that we're getting out of some of these projects too. So we're going to need to provide a kind of a holistic view of where we're going today and into the future to bring our basin into sustainability. Next slide, please. Okay, so to really frame this conversation now a little bit more narrowly, is our goal is to take a specific look at what DWR has designated as correction action number 2. So as part of DWR's response to our sustainability plan, one of the key takeaways, I obviously don't have the time to get into the full description of their exact wording, but some of the key takeaways that we've identified along with some of the GSA staff is that really the main take-home message is that the GSAs really need the tools to ensure sustainability, regardless whether it's hydrologic uncertainty, whether it's project timeline, whether it's effectiveness or overall yield, right? There's a lot of variables out there in the world that could, that really depend on how effective our projects are. And basically the state is saying, hey, regardless of any of those, those variables, or any of that uncertainty, you need to be able to prove to the state that we at least have the tools in the toolbox ready to go in place so that we will can guarantee sustainability. And so how do we answer that really is there's a little bit of a tweak. We're going to reframe the narrative, so to speak, as far as how we're presenting the GSP to the state overall. And so really one of the main messages to that is that we are initially, at least our first round of submittal of the GSP, we really put our projects as first, right? We really wanted to solve as much of our sustainability challenges, solve as much of our overdraft as possible with supply side projects, right? We wanted to do, we're ready to use management actions. We're certainly committed to sustainability, but they were really more of a secondary as needed item. And so one of the major things that DWR is directly asking us to do is they want that management action front and center. That management action is really going to be some form of demand management, of ensuring that our overdraft does not continue into the near future. And so again, we are just highlighting that as our primary tool, again, to guarantee sustainability. Obviously, we want to, actually I'll jump down to kind of this bottom one here, obviously want that, the goal of that is to mitigate as much of that demand reduction as much as possible with projects. But again, that management action needs to be set as primary, specifically to be a backstop, right? Regardless of all those uncertain components that I mentioned a moment ago, we need that backstop to say, hey, if for some reason, let's say we go into the world's worst drought, and then immediately next year, right? Regardless of any uncertainty, we need to make sure that we can guarantee sustainability, and that's what DWR is really looking for. And so, as part of this revision of the management actions, right, is we want to make sure that both GSAs have the tools in their toolbox to act effectively, efficiently, and in a timely manner. So really, that's the goal of this from a policy perspective. And so, we've been working with the GSAs over the past few months to really work out the details of some of these PMAs. And so hopefully we're gonna be able to present some of them to you today. We won't have all of them. We still have a couple more scenarios in the works, but we'll have the bulk of the conversation ready to go. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so we just want to kind of put a visual to visualize that. When we originally submitted the GSP, these two major components here, we have projects and management actions, they were flipped, right? We wanted to focus on projects and then use management actions as needed, if they were required. And what DWR is asking, and how we're presenting our GSP this time, is that our management actions are front and center, right? We have these demand reduction strategies. We have domestic well mitigation, which we just talked about. And right, these are our major commitment to showing that we will be sustainable in the future. And we are supplementing all those management actions with a variety of projects. And so, boy, we do have a lot of projects, and we'll kind of show you the impacts of those too. But again, it's how we set forth the paradigm that DWR is asking for. Okay, so then to dive into some of the more technical stuff as we continue to drill down, one of the major items here when we get into projects and management actions is now how do we present that to the state. And so project management actions are really designed to go into these kind of the three groups that you see here, right? Particularly when it comes to our projects, we have group one is what we consider ongoing efforts, ongoing projects and management actions, things that are already in place to manage the basin. Some of them have been put into place in the past couple of years. They're really just they're really ramping up right now. And so those are basically guaranteed. Those are things that we're actively doing. Group two then jumps into what we consider planned project and management actions. These are ones that are readily implemented. They're ready to go. We have funding, we have plans, we have preliminary design. We are in the process, but they just haven't quite hit the street yet. And then group three is what we're considering supplemental projects and management actions. And these are kind of what we consider, kind of those back burner potential projects, that can be implemented as needed, but are not actively being pursued at this time. Next slide, please. Okay, so, but what does that mean for the modeling? And so our goal is overall is to model a plethora of scenarios. We have these 5 sets here to really give us a full picture of, what are some of the conditions that we can see in the basin in the near future, depending on what projects and management actions that we have. And so really what we're focusing on today is the first 3 of those scenarios. As I said, we'll get into 4 and 5 at our next meeting, but for the first 3 is what we're going to show you some results today. My coworker Andreas Diaz is going to kind of give you a little bit more detailed technical rundown of those. But really the goal of this you can see here. So we have scenario 1, right, which is really focused on group 1 projects. That means those are projects, again, that are actively being implemented. But so what is the basin going to look like if we don't do anything new, but we have all the stuff we currently have in place, plus this big demand reduction component here, right? And from there, again, that's kind of our worst case scenario. From there, we want to build on additional scenarios. Scenario 2 brings online all the planned projects and action. Yes, we have the TID Group 2 projects here, as well as the East Turlock Subbasin GSA Group 2 projects with local water. Basically, it's recovery of runoff and recharge of that runoff. And that's scenario 2. And then again, scenario 3 is to even build on that even further with adding this bottom box here. It says group 2 projects with TID water. Those are projects that are being implemented in the Eastern GSA, but then being supplemented with additional surface water supply from TID. So we'll have kind of the combination of all three of those to see, hopefully, that you'll be able to see how, you know, our overall aquifer health based in sustainability kind of continues to build with each of these conditions. So then we get into modeling assumptions. So before I turn it over to Andres, I want to add one extra additional step. So one of the components that we had heard from DWR, in addition to just being able to show a commitment to sustainability, is that they want to be able to acknowledge, you know, what's going to go on between today and the full build out. So a lot of our sustainability analysis for the GSP was very heavily focused in on this kind of right-hand side, which is what we call the sustainable period, right? That means every single project is built. They are active. They are based on a very consistent 50-year sustainable period of hydrology. And so, right, we know that the conditions under full build out, we're confident from our previous modeling runs for the GSP development that we are sustainable. But what DWR has been asked us to build on top of that is really to ask, well, what are we going to do in the next 20 years, right, as we continue to build out these projects? And so with that, we were actually simulating two separate hydrologic periods. One from the last 20 years, so 1999 through 2018, and then this a little bit of what we consider a drier one, and I'll show you that in a second. This 1987 to 2006. Basically, it's a drier condition. You can note the 87 to 92 drought is right at the beginning of that, and we're trying to get an idea of, you know, what's worst case scenario again. Like, what if we do go into another drought? We need to be able to show the state that we are going to achieve sustainability, and so we're kind of building on our historical conditions. We'll have this 20-year implementation period where we show the build out of the projects and the kind of the general trend that the basin will go under before we hit this sustainability period post 2042, once everything's fully built out. Next slide. So what does that mean? I said a second ago, when it comes to our implementation, I said we're looking to look at two different hydrologic periods. And really this is an attempt to quantify uncertainty when it comes to hydrologic conditions. And so one of the major things we can hear, right, is we don't know what this year, next year, the following year, what our hydrology, what our water supply is going to look like. And so we want to understand what the conditions will be both under a normal, fairly normal condition. You can see it's a very gradual. We have some years that are above, some years that are below, but overall kind of a fairly normalized implementation period, kind of a fairly flatline conditions. In addition to that, though, we want to take a look at what happens if the next several years are going to a drought, right? What is that worst case scenario that we could be faced with, right? And because we need the ability to ensure sustainability regardless of conditions. And so we want to be able to evaluate what happens if we have another iteration of the 87 to 92 drought right off the bat. What will water levels look like, and how can we plan accordingly, right? Because this is overall a big planning sustainability effort. And so what we get from that when we kind of throw those two options into the model, Andres, can get to the next slide. Thank you. And so I don't want to get too much into the specifics of this, but really what I want to just really focus on, draw your attention, is right here, kind of in the middle of each of these two charts. You'll notice the two vertical bars designate our 20-year implementation period. And what you can see, again, is between the orange line and the green line are two different hydrologic conditions, two potential scenarios that we have related to how much water, what's the water supply and availability. And basically what I really just want to draw your attention to bring to is that there is uncertainty. We know that there's a lot of variability, and we can do our best to be able to model that within reason, right? We're not doing any crazy making up our own super dry or super wet conditions, but that overall the goal is to bound this analysis by looking at a fairly normal condition, and of what happens like a worst case dry scenario over the next 5 to 7 years. What would water levels look like? And so one of the things you can kind of see here in the if we compare the orange and the green, is that you can see that there is a good degree of uncertainty. Sometimes we look at the variability in water levels in the near term, right? In the next 5-10 years, can easily be upwards of 25 feet of head, 30 feet of head. But that part of this evaluation is to be able to give the GSAs the tools to adaptively manage the basin regardless of those conditions, right? We'll hope for the best, we'll work towards the best, but we need to plan for the worst. And so we want to make sure that we provide the basin with those tools and that knowledge. And so, but overall, you can see here from both of these images is that as you get further out, right, the The later half of the sustainability period, particularly, the overall operations and management of the basin, the two lines kind of come together, right? There's obviously going to be uncertainty there long term, but that hydrology has a tendency to, it averages, it normalizes across the basin. And so, we do see kind of them coming together over time. It's just there's a lot of uncertainty in the next couple of years. And so we're trying to quantify that at the best we can. So next slide, Andres. Okay, and so with that, at least that framework in mind, I'd like to pass it over to Andreas here. He's been doing all the modeling and a lot of the technical analysis of the projects and management actions that we have. And so I'm going to turn it over to him to take you through some of the details. But please, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to interrupt us and we'll do the best to answer them. So take it away, sir.
Thank you, Dominic. So I'm going to go forward and kind of go through the different assumptions that we did when we were building the model. Let's see. First, I want to talk about the municipal and industrial projects that were incorporated. Here we talk about the Regional Surface Water Supply Project, SRWA, which is part of Group 1, and it adds up to 30,000 acre-feet per year of surface water to the cities of Turlock and Ceres. That's the only municipal project that is in Group 1. The other 3 are in Group 2. There's the Waterford and Hickman Pump Station, which delivers waters to the elements in pink here and up to 900 acre-feet per year of in-lieu recharge starting in 2027. There's also the Diane Storm Basin project, which provides 422.5 acre-feet of water of direct recharge starting in 2023 from TID and the city of Turlock. And there's also the Advanced Metering Infrastructure project, which is a reduction of demand from 228 gallons per capita per day to 175 in the city of Modesto, and affects the elements in gray here on the left side of the map. Following along are the projects related to the Turlock Irrigation District. These are groups 1 and 2. Group 1 is only the Ceres main project, which is a spill capture project. They try to reduce spills by about 10,000 acre-feet per year. And of those reduced spills, we are going to apply 6,600 acre-feet of in-lieu recharge and reduce pumping up 3,400. I'm not going to go through all of these projects. The idea is to just give so you can have an idea of what the number is of the total of these projects that we have. But here's also a table in case you want to take a look later and have a little bit more detail on what each of these projects come along. But overall, what we have is that we have direct recharge of about 8,100 acre-feet per year, of in-lieu recharge about 13,000, reduced pumping of 5,000, which totals 26,000 acre-feet per year. And we also need to note that water supply is dependent on hydrology and depends on the Ptolemy releases above flow requirements. So the design numbers that we will get from these projects will be different from what we're actually going to model, because they depend on these Ptolemy river releases, which, as Dominic said, depends on hydrology and have some uncertainty incorporated into it. Following along are the East Turlock Subbasin GSA projects. There's the Mustang Creek, which relies on runoff from Mustang Creek, about 600 acre-feet per year, and it's modeled as in-lieu recharge during irrigation season. It's modeled to be 100% by 2027. And there's the Upland Waterford Pipeline, which is 1,100 acre-feet per year of managed releases from Merced ID, and it's also in-lieu recharge during irrigation season. And we have created a build-out of 50% by 2027 and 100% by 2032. Additionally, this is for scenario 3, which incorporates the project with TID water. And this is the agricultural recharge project, which has 3 different phases. Each phase has some in-lieu and direct recharge. The in-lieu recharge occurs during the irrigation season, and the direct recharge occurs during non-irrigation season. And here, color-coded is the elements from the model that get delivered water from each of these phases. And here's the annual average yield, which on average is about 23,800 acre-feet per year. And there's also the demand reduction that's going in the East Turlock GSA, and is the reduced agricultural area of Group 2 users, which is the elements shaded in blue to mitigate groundwater production. And it has this implementation schedule that starts from 2022, 0%, and ends by 2042, we should have which starts with the sustainable period, the reduction of ag acreage is about 40%. So this big table over here shows a project yield summary for the sustainable period for all of these projects, the urban, the West Turlock Subbasin GSA, the East Turlock Subbasin GSA, how they affect indirect recharge, in lieu recharge, demand reduction, and pumping reduction. Here's very detailed table that you can go later and maybe take a look if you want further details, but the takeaway points that I want to focus are on the bottom right of the table, where we see the total of each of the scenarios, where we have about 130 acre-feet per year of yield for scenario 1, 150 for scenario 2, and 170 for scenario 3. So that
Andres?
Yes.
That's thousands, right? You said 140, yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's 140,000, I'm sorry.
Perfect.
129,000, 149,000, and 173,000 on the bottom right of the table. So this is the project yield summary, and once we incorporate all of these models, assumptions, and inputs into the Turlock model, we can get some model results and see how the subbasin is going on once we add these projects. Here we have the operational budget, which shows the deep percolation, canal and reservoir, and direct recharge, and groundwater pumping, and we see the operational impact at the bottom row. And I want to focus on the columns that are highlighted in green and at the bottom row, which we show that the operational impact of each of the scenarios. And what we call impact is the difference between the sustainable period of the model against the baseline that we have provided in the GSP. And we see that the impact is similar to the yields that we were looking at in the previous tables, but they are a little lower, and that's because there are some losses in efficiency. And we see that, but we still have like a similar differences between the scenarios. So the impact of scenario 1 is about 116. The impact of scenario 2 is about 134,000. And the impact of scenario 3 is 158,000. So there's like 20,000 acre-feet per year of difference in each of these scenarios. And once we incorporate other components that affect the groundwater budget, such as net stream seepage, inflow from foothills, and net subsurface flows, we can see overall in the groundwater budget what is the storage deficit and what is the impact of each of these scenarios. So we see that compared against the baseline, we reduce our storage deficit in scenario 1 by 14,400, of scenario 2 by 14,800, and for scenario 3 by 15,900. And we can see it here in a graph showing all of the groundwater budget components and the cumulative change in storage. So the groundwater budget components are the stacked bar charts that you see for each time step. And the cumulative change in storage is the lines that you see across the charts. The orange line shows the sustainability period, the implementation period, while the dark line shows the sustainable period of the change in storage. And the dotted line below shows the baseline, and we see what is the difference between the baseline and, in this case, scenario 1, what is the difference in the cumulative change in storage. So we see that the impact of having the projects in scenario 1 makes us, by the end of our 50-year sustainable period, go from a deficit of around 400,000 acre-feet per year to over 500,000 acre-feet per year in this case. And as we move along to scenario 2, we see that we get a more positive change in storage in the aquifer. And as we move along into scenario 3, an even larger positive change in storage. We also provided some model results in groundwater levels. Here we show some of the monitoring network wells and how the groundwater model performs regarding groundwater levels in this area. We have, like Dominic mentioned when he was talking about the variability in the implementation period, we have on the left side, we have the historical starting from 1992 until 2022. Then from 2022 to 2042, we have the implementation period. And from 2042 to 2092, we have the sustainable period. And we added the scenario 1 in orange, scenario 2 in purple, and scenario 3 in kind of a dark yellow. We added as well as the MTs and the MOs if they're available, and the IMs if they're available, as the dotted lines, horizontal dotted lines. Here we see on the western area of the subbasin the impact of each of the scenarios. We see that, and compared against the baseline, we see that the model is performing a little better. On the southern part of TID, we also have to take into account here the projects that are around the western side of the subbasin are mostly surface water projects, the ones related to TID. And here we see the effects of those projects. If we move towards along to the eastern side of the basin where the demand reduction is going along, we see a further change in the groundwater elevations compared to the baseline because of the demand reduction that's going on. And we also see here the difference between scenarios 1 and 2 compared to scenario 3. And that's because of the agricultural recharge project that's going on in scenario 3. And we see that difference moving along through the groundwater levels. Here's also as we move towards the east and the impacts on the groundwater levels. So as a conclusions, we have 3 different items that we want to talk about. The first one is groundwater storage. By looking at the groundwater budget, we see that the subbasin mitigates overdrafts by implementing the PMAs as designed in scenarios 1 through 3. Groundwater levels, the simulated water levels at most monitoring well locations show groundwater levels maintained above minimum thresholds during the sustainable period, and additional analysis is needed to evaluate recovery from IMs to above MTs during the implementation period. And we also want to bring the point about uncertainty, which local hydrology and project implementation will affect real world conditions, and GSAs and DWR will evaluate sustainability based on observed data. Our next steps are going to be develop the scenarios 4 and 5, which implement the multi-benefit land repurposing program, work with GSAs to finalize project details, and revise GSP and incorporate updated PMAs. So now I'm opening for any questions that you might have regarding our work.
Andre, this is Mike Pizza in Belico. A couple of slides back, you mentioned additional analysis was required to look at recovery from IMs to above MTs. Can you elaborate on that? Somehow I've never internalized that, or you might have said it before, but can you elaborate on what you have in mind in terms of what additional analysis is needed and when it would be conducted?
I think it would refer to the establish a statistical method to develop the number of times that the groundwater levels drop below the MTs, and try to come up with some statistics regarding those numbers based on our simulated groundwater levels.
I see.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that So do the modeling results show that there's potentially an issue with groundwater levels dropping below MTs during that implementation period?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think just if I can add a little bit of additional context, this also goes back to where I spoke to a little moment ago on a lot of the uncertainty associated with the hydrology over the next few years, right? Particularly that's why we have the two bookends. You looking at the two different hydrologies, kind of in the near term, right? So effectively right now we have a little bit of a bookend to acknowledge that we don't exactly know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. And one of the things that we have committed to DWR is to not only to arrest, but to reverse the overdraft in the basin, right? So DWR is not only looking for us to flatten our water levels, but we need to actually increase water levels from our interim milestones to at least well above the MTs. And so one of the things that we're hoping to add in context to the GSP as part of these revisions is a uncertainty analysis associated with these projects' ability to, in the near term, turn around the water level trends, and to the point that we can, in the very next few years, in the GSP, we say in the 2027, 2028 timeline. So in the next couple of years that we want to make sure that we are going, water levels are going up, particularly parts of the sub-basin where we are currently below the MTs. And so the goal of that evaluation, that uncertainty analysis, is to make sure that we are headed in the right direction.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's obviously something I'd like to focus some attention on, exactly how that would be analyzed and how it would be done. I mean, overall, I was encouraged to see that when you look at the sustainability period, it looks like that the groundwater levels for the most part are doing exactly what we would want. One question that I would have is, I think our interim milestones for 2027 in the Eastern Principal Aquifer are, with, I think, one exception, all set below the MT. Assuming that our 2032 interim milestones are set at the MTs, so it would be expected that we would be below MTs on average in almost all of our Eastern Principal Aquifer wells for the next 8 years. Is that something that you've considered?
Exactly. So that is our goal, and that's what we're trying to show in the modeling, and that is that under a variety of hydrologic conditions, that all these projects, once combined with management actions, have the capability to basically, we're shooting for a low point to be in that 2020 by 2027, and that we will be able to recover by the 2032 timeline.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any more questions for Dominic and Andrews? To me, the summation point is, I think, and Dominic hit this early on, is DWR has told us that demand management comes first, right? Pumping restrictions need to come first. And that Mike Tietze presented at this meeting last month and presented to the West Turlock board, showing what the East Turlock folks are working on in terms of demand management, their demand management program, which is very encouraging. I think that's really good. And the project we're proposing will help offset the amount of demand management, right? So the more successful we are with the projects, the fewer pumping restrictions on the east side. But kind of the conversation there, DWR said, we need to start turning this around by 2027. We've shown, like we did with our GSP, in the long term, we'll get there. But they're like, that's great, but can you start doing that sooner? Or you need to start doing that sooner. And so there's that need to move as quickly as we can to turn the overdraft around by 2027. And then also what Dominic said, the state said, hey, it's great you're modeling this, fine, but if you start off with severe drought, what are you going to do? You know, you're projecting kind of typical conditions, but there's severe drought, what are you going to do? And that's where they want us, or particularly the East Turlock folks, to have their pumping demand management program in place so it can be implemented right away, rather than committing to developing a plan, having a plan in place that can be implemented right away. So,
Michael, I have a question. So when they do their ag water management plan, does that get reflected in their ag, all these things that they're?
So the ag water management plan will be done by TID. Mike, I don't think East Turlock is not required to do an ag water management plan. I don't believe. Right.
No, we're not. I mean, you know, MID and TID will have an ag water management plan. That's not something that really figures into our planning.
Right. But the programs, management actions that we're proposing as part of the GSP, yes, they'll be incorporated into the ag water management plan. Because we're showing demand reduction and projects on the West Turlock side too. You know, like some of the projects TID is doing in terms of regulating reservoirs to reduce spills, to increase surface water recharge and reduce groundwater pumping.
But the water budget and those ag water management reflect the crop and all that stuff that.
Correct.
So, I mean, depending on what crop, I mean, you're only gonna reduce so much, right? So.
Right, so again, it's using your water more efficiently, right? And then in those good years, like we're having right now, when land's fallow, can we put surface water on that and percolate it, right? Can we irrigate during the winter to percolate? So putting other programs in place that focus on groundwater recharge when the water is available. So outside of crop demand.
So we'll be looking at the crops themselves as far as, I guess the water that's needed for an orchard is much more significant, and you don't take a year off from that.
Right.
So are they looking to,
Crops,
to basically change the crop turnover to something that's done on an annual basis on short periods of drought? You can just say, hey, that stays fallow.
No.
Don't grow anything.
No, but what I think what's happening, at least on behalf of TID, in those really dry years, when supply is cut, they'll put a minimum amount on to keep the trees alive, right? But not say to produce a crop.
But what I guess I'm saying is there an idea of removing or reducing the amount of trees? Because what I'm hearing out there is the cost per pound of almonds is getting worse and worse. It could be a moot point. They may just start pulling orchards out and going to a different crop anyways, but is there a plan to say, hey, let's go with something that's not going to be an annual requirement to put water on it?
I know not in the West Turlock, just in the TID area. Mike, I don't know in your multi-benefit land repurposing program, what you have in terms of changes to crop type or other things to reduce hard demand. Can you touch on that?
You know, anything is on the table. So the things that we're currently considering along those lines would be, number one, essentially rotational fallowing of orchards. So when an almond orchard is ready to come out, other than replanting it right away, incentivizing a grower not to replant for several years. So say for 3 years is what we're currently thinking. We also will incentivize recropping to lower demand crops, and then various other strategies for land repurposing that take land out of irrigation. So our primary strategy is to reduce the irrigated acreage at any one time.
That help one?
So you're gonna take orchards out and have orchard guys start planting crops they've never split before?
Well, you know, what they choose to plant will be their business, but what we will do is, for example, repurpose orchard swales to remove trees and just, you know, provide hydrologic buffers in those areas. And if it's far enough west, that'll also provide some more recharge. So that's just an example. And then when orchards come out, paying them not to replant. That in itself will result in, I forget what exactly it is. It's something between 10 and 20,000 acre feet per year of water savings. So, I mean, between various different strategies, we want to put together a goal of 21,000 acres of land being repurposed to non-irrigated use by 2037. And in addition to that, incentivizing other practices such as, you know, water-wise cover cropping, irrigation efficiency, and recropping for additional water savings.
Is there an incentive list already out, or is that still in the works?
There's an incentive list out as part of our MLRP scope, and in some of the presentations that we've put together in terms of practices that we will incentivize. In terms of the amounts of the incentives, that's something that we're gonna get to work on determining, and we'll determine between now and the end of the fiscal, and the end of the year.
Would there be caps on how much water farmers get? So that way it kind of points them in a direction, okay, this is how much I can, you know,
Like a weaning off or just a.
Just say, hey.
Metaphor.
well, just say, hey,
Yeah,
you know,
we-
you're not,
We've got a tiered allocation program and tiered charges program that we're planning to implement, and that would be in place also roughly by the end of the year, around the same time that we adopt our proposed extraction fee.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I commend the East Turlock folks. They've really, since we got the letter from DWR, really doubled down. And some of the stuff was in the work with the multi-purpose, multi-benefit land repurposing, but really doubled down on how to address the concerns that DWR had. And I think we're moving in the right direction.
There's nothing like a deficiency letter from DWR to get you focused.
that'll get your attention, right?
Motivation.
Particularly when you're seeing what the other folks further south in the valley are going through the probation period with the state water board, you realize what the alternative is, and it's not a good alternative.
They usually come with a pitchfork and a.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, I've seen those before.
Anything else on the project management actions? As you say, it's project management actions combined with a backstop of pumping restrictions that are going to hopefully get us in compliance with DWR. So thank you, Dominic and Andres, for your presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Okay, so with that, we'll go to item 7, which is the domestic well mitigation plan. This is something else that DWR pointed out in the efficiency letter. And we are seeking direction on a preferred approach. I think, well, since we put this agenda together, I think the options we're putting out there are pretty benign, because one of the options is to give us more time to put the plan together. So no decisions and no decisions that put us in like a direction we can't change course in are going to happen today. So we've got plenty of time to change course. We're just get an overall concept of where we want to go and where we want to be. We'll go from there. So I'll hand it over to Iris. You're going to take the lead on this?
Right. Yes,
Wonderful.
thank
Iris,
you.
Iris has been trolling the internet and everything else, finding what others are doing, which is the best place to start, I found, and go from there. So Iris, I'll hand over to you.
Good for the goose. Good for the
Thank you
gander.
very much. So it's a team effort over here, and building the well mitigation program based on the well analysis that Liz Elliott and Chad Taylor provided to you earlier. So for this well mitigation program, as mentioned, I compiled it from numerous, half a dozen well mitigation programs from other agencies that I could look at. They were really quite variable, some very brief, some comprehensive and strong. And my thought was to pull together as many items as I can for your consideration, whether you want it, in your program or not. So this is a work in progress, and I certainly welcome whatever comments or questions you have. So this is a program that DWR said, well, there's a potential for dry wells to occur due to declining groundwater levels with the continuing overdraft. And so you should have a well mitigation program. And what this program does is it describes how the GSAs can mitigate impacts to water supply wells that failed, again, because of declining groundwater levels caused by overdraft. So it is focused on short-term mitigation, but in the spirit of being comprehensive and flexible, it also acknowledges long-term projects. So I kind of broke those out a little bit on this slide. So first of all, a well goes dry, and we had some discussion of what that means, but basically it means that, a person, a household, can no longer get sufficient water supply reliably for their beneficial uses. So a short-term temporary solution might be providing them with bottled water or water tanks. This is emergency, it's short-term, thought to be interim while we figure out what's going on and come up with a solution. Then other somewhat longer term mitigation could be, replacing the pump, setting the pump deeper, well rehabilitation if the damage to the well is due to declining groundwater levels, even well replacement. And then even longer term, I think, is to be mindful that, over the long term, demand management is going to make a difference, probably more in some areas than in others, as you just saw from Dominic's presentation. And managed aquifer recharge can be implemented. So if those, have an effect in a priority area, well, that counts to me as part of this mitigation program. So any questions? I wanted to get you an idea of what we would be doing. And so if not, let's go to the next slide. So, so once we have an idea of what we might do, then the next question is how. And so what I did for simplicity's sake, and again, I'm open to comments, was I assumed that there would be a memorandum of understanding between TACs. And again, I'm not legal counsel, and there's other possibilities, but I assumed an MOU, and then when it comes to all of the recitals, the whereases and such, left that blank. But an important part of this is, again, how are you going to do that? So what we're doing at this point, based on interaction, with you all, is to have a well mitigation committee. This would be an ad hoc committee, and they would be responsible for developing and implementing the program on behalf of the TACs. And so that means a lot of different things. It means developing a claims process. What kind of claims are going to be eligible for mitigation? And that's an important topic. These are very often called domestic well mitigation programs. But do you want to limit it to just domestic wells now, or have flexibility? That's a question for you. Then claims administration. How do you do it? And so it's going to be a matter of someone claims a dry well and then requests mitigation. And so there's going to be an administrative process for that. Clearly, there's going to be public outreach so that people know that this service is available. And then once they know it's available, they run into a problem. There should be claims assistance. We'll probably try to make the claims process not onerous, but it could be that some people will need assistance with filling out their application. And then clearly an important topic is going to be funding. So the program, as we're laying it out now, provides for a well mitigation fund. Any questions or comments so far?
So good so far, Iris. Keep it rolling.
Keep it rolling, okay. So this is actually my last slide in this PowerPoint, because this is something that DWR said, if there's going to be dry wells due to overdraft in this basin, then have a mitigation program. So we are developing it right now. We're going to have an implementation schedule because we want to demonstrate commitment to DWR that we're really doing this thing. So those are the slides that I had to just give you, a very quick overview, but did I understand correctly that some copies of the draft have been circulated?
No, they haven't, Iris. If you can
Okay,
flash up what you've been working on, that would be good.
okay, well, if I can share the screen. Let's see. Then, here, just bear with me. Oh, here we go. Share. Have we got it?
There it is.
Yes?
Yep.
Good, thank you. Okay, great.
So
So,
kind of, maybe Iris, I can provide some context, when we were meeting as a group last week. My thought was, we're not gonna get this done by July 16th, right? There's too much to work on, too much to figure out, some things we have to agree on. But if we put together a skeletal concept like Iris has got here, you know, with some things like, we need to resolve this to be determined, right? And then maybe a cover, not a cover letter, but some description in the revisions say, we're gonna have a plan, we're gonna finish it by the end of this calendar year. It's gonna have these components, we've agreed to fund it for $100,000. This is
yes,
what it's gonna do. That would probably, I believe, would get DWR to say, yep, you're working on it, you got a schedule, you got an outline, you got the basic structure there. You're good to go. Please finish
Yeah.
it up by the deadline.
right, then it's a robust program. And that was our intent all along, is to lay that out and get as far as we can with it. So at this point, you see the work in progress in front of you. I chose to show you this version that's got a lot of markup because it's a work in progress. I also added yellow highlighting for particular issues that, you know, we need to pay attention to as we work through this. So as you, and is this large enough for everyone to see? I can
Yeah, I
make it
think
bigger.
If you can make it a little bit bigger, that would be good. And we can obviously email it around after the meeting too.
Okay. So I can zoom it up a bit and then let's try that. Okay, good.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, so one of the topics was, is this a program only for domestic wells? And we have discussed this, and as you can see, it's highlighted, but it's also crossed out because what I have been hearing so far is that saying that it's only for domestic wells might be too narrow. What if there's a small farmer's agricultural well that goes dry? And we have some direction from DWR to not be too limiting from the get-go. But the fact is that we're going to be checking in with DWR on this very issue. So stay tuned. Some of this is just starting, you know, to say, you know, who is going to do what. It's the GSAs going through the agreement. And then another topic that I've highlighted is exactly what problems are we going to be mitigating for? Certainly declining groundwater levels. But how about water quality degradation that occurs because of declining ground? Or how about subsidence? Those are a lot tougher to document, to know that it's really happening. So at this point, our thinking is to not include water quality degradation as a cause of well failure or subsidence, but to leave in some language later in the document that gives you all the flexibility, if you choose, to consider other possibilities. So that's kind of where this particular issue stands right now. So groundwater levels. So potential program mitigation measures. You know, we've listed the typical things. We have, excuse me, X'd out water treatment because it's not something that we're putting out front. I have gotten, some excellent editing and suggestions on the wording, which I have included here. Some of the formatting is kind of messed up, but it's a work in progress. And then in another important part of this is the well mitigation committee. And so this well mitigation committee, as I mentioned, would oversee development and implementation of the program. And they would work for the technical advisory committees. And the technical advisory committees, clearly are working under and for the GSA boards of directors. So that's kind of the organization that we've set up so far. Any comments about that?
So how would that agreement address any, let's say you brought up private wells and so forth. So like, let's say a right of entry or temporary easement to access that well. I mean, how would that be addressed? And
We've got language.
okay.
That and I can scroll down to it.
No, that's fine. I mean, it sounds like it sounds like some bus agreement.
Things have been
Yeah.
thought about, yeah.
Yeah.
But the bottom line, if someone would have to apply to the program, like, we think your lack of management of the basin has affected my well. And so the thing is, okay, you want some help, then we need to come out and do an investigation. If they say, oh, you're not coming on my land, well, now you're not eligible to
Yes.
participate in the program.
Right.
Because the biggest problem is, a lot of times you touch those privates and basically once you've done something, you almost like own it, right? Because now you're responsible for
Like Pottery Barn, you break it, you own it.
pretty much.
Yeah, we have to work our way through that stuff.
Yeah, we've got some language and careful reading and editing is appreciated.
Too much coffee to go.
Okay, so another important topics of funding. And again, I looked at quite a variety of programs. Just a short paragraph saying the GSA's promise to set up a fund, which I didn't think was particularly robust. So we looked at others where they really laid it out in some detail, and we tended to adopt that, but that there would be a dry well mitigation fund that will have an amount of money in it and a discussion of how it will be funded initially and then through time. So that's the key discussion here. But the idea was that we would work it out, that the well mitigation committee working on this year would work out further details, working with you, and then have it together for implementation. You'll also notice that I have highlighted dates when we're going to do things. These also are preliminary, but we put them in there, as dates so that we can really consider what it means, subject to revision. Then, are there any comments about funding so far?
So far, so good, Iris.
So far, so good. Okay. Then, we did encounter some well mitigation programs that had a lot of detail. So I put it in here again for your consideration. The term is important because that's going to say, what claims are you willing to mitigate? And the decision thus far is those that occurred after January 6, 2022, when you adopted your GSP. So you're not trying to fix every dry well that happened before then. And then there's also language that that this program would get started at a certain date. We have language about public outreach. Again, letting the people know out there that this program exists, probably with posters, with things on your website, etc., for outreach. Another important topic is the application for assistance. So someone has a problem with a well, and then they think that perhaps they should get some assistance with it and mitigation. So this basically says, if you think that you're going to put in an application, then please provide this information. In some cases, there may not be available, but provide what you can. It can go from, telling us about your well, when did it first fail, getting information from the pump contractor or a well driller who says, your well is not yielding water because it's dry. And then they can put in that application. And this came up already. Applicants must allow on-site inspection. Okay, so the application would then be submitted, and we can work out how that occurs, but it would go to the Well Mitigation Committee for the claims process. And bear with me, I'm going to go down through the document. There's actually a nice graphic down here that explains, you apply for well mitigation. You might need to get some short-term, that bottled water. The well will be assessed. You'll see if you're eligible. And then we get into this kind of flow chart of, are you eligible? Yes or no. The mitigation. And then you get to the point, again, where the property owner is now responsible for the well. So I thought that this was a very useful flow chart that I plagiarized from other documents from some of your neighboring agencies.
Allowed forever.
We're just joking about you use the word plagiarize.
We use borrow around here. It's more.
Borrow.
Okay. Well, okay, we're just borrowing it. They can have it
Just
back.
backing.
Yeah.
Plagiarize sounds like we're doing something wrong. Yeah. At least where I went to school.
Well, I took their names off of it.
Okay. To
And we
protect
can
the
put
innocent.
your name in it, and then it's ours.
Right.
Okay.
That's how that works.
Okay,
took their
so,
name off.
Yeah, it's mine now.
okay, so the
Not
claims
DJ.
process is
Well,
going to
it's
be
a word.
ours. There's more language about limitations, claims accrued between January 6, 2022. And then there's other language and, the adoption of this policy. In other words, you can't let your well go dry and then show up years later complaining about, it's just
good point.
reasonable language in here. And claims must be initiated before expenses are incurred. So another a bit of important control there. So then, who is this well mitigation committee? And from other agencies, I borrowed their ideas for who might be on it. These are options. You don't have to have them all, but an engineer from the particular GSA, a licensed hydrogeologist that you hire to look at the application, to look at the well, a registered environmental health person, the well owner might be included, or their representative, and then perhaps a technical representative from a GSA that's not the GSA that the well is in. So again, for your consideration. So the application would come to them, and there's language on interim remedies. There's language about, you're going to process claims in a timely way. I would say that some agencies actually say that, you will process it in 30 days. I don't have that in here, but if you choose to add that, okay. You can put in language like that all the way to, we will put your well in within 6 months. And then the claims that are eligible, I would say, to mitigation, well failures caused by declining groundwater levels, caused by overdraft. That occurred after January 6, 2022. And then we added language, excuse me, about diminished well yields, such that reasonable demands can no longer be met. So that is a bit more expansive to people who, are not getting enough water, though their well is not officially dry. And here's this language: at its discretion, the Well Mitigation Committee may review a claim application and then submit a recommendation to the TAC to address other aquifer problems. And then I simply added some language about it could be water quality. Okay. Then the claim administration, and we decided on a relatively simple organization of the Well Mitigation Committee. Does a tremendous amount of work. They look at the claim. They can do their own investigation. They'll write a memo and make a recommendation for funding to the tax. The tax then review that, and if they wish, can refer it upstairs to the board of directors. And there's language in here, complete or partial mitigation. So we mentioned that we don't have all the rules yet about how that might work, but that's something that we can then work on later.
Yeah.
Question or comment?
Nothing here, Iris.
Okay, then and then there was, additional verbiage here about well owner agreements. And, you have to work hand in hand and have the owner agree to some things, like how much money, award, whose responsibility is it after the mitigation? Spell that out. They should indemnify the GSA. And then they might have to provide you an easement or land use permission. Mention permitting and environmental review. We don't need CEQA for our GSP planning, but if you get into a major project as part of this program, then it's possible that the county will want to advise you on that. So that's basically the document that we have work in progress. And, I'm very happy to receive, markup from you so I can incorporate your ideas, or if there's questions and comments now.
Just I had a question actually for Sarah, because she's been through this process. Is the notion of partial mitigation a non-starter for DWR, or are we in a place where we can put that on the table without getting dinged for it?
And when you say partial mitigation,
so if we say that if we equivocate in our language in the MOU to communicate that we are not necessarily committed to completely funding well replacement in all cases. Is that within the realm of, is that, you know, I know that's gonna trigger some folks, but will it trigger DWR?
Probably.
Yeah.
I think I would leave it unsaid at this point in time. I would not commit either way.
So just call it mitigation. Don't say full mitigation, don't say partial.
Correct.
Just call it mitigation. Okay, that was my only question at this point. I just wanted to bring it up before I forget it.
Yeah, because I mean, the good news is if you decide to fund it fully, they're probably going to be happy. If you decide to fund it partially, you at least are in a position to have a dialogue about that because your GSP has been approved. And so you can have a dialogue and determine what their position is versus what our capabilities are and try to come to a resolution rather than making a hard statement now that puts you in a box.
That's very
I'm going
insightful,
to-
Sarah.
I have to step away, but the rest, we'll still have a quorum, so we're good here, and I'm just gonna call in and listen in.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, any questions for Iris?
Yeah, I think the only one I had was whether it's the property owner. So when we worked with the Central Water Collaborative on the nitrate issue, bottle delivery, one of the things was a lot of them are tenants.
Right.
That live in even ranch houses, farmhouses, stuff like that. And they were able to apply for the bottle delivery, much different than a well.
Mhm.
But how would that go or how would that work with someone having issues with the
Right.
well? A lot of owners are out of state. So a lot of owners don't really have a clue what goes on some of their properties here. How would that work? Or is that something that they would just maybe go to a bottle delivery with sea salts, or how would that work?
Yeah, so I think, I remember the draft ordinance talks about, or draft MOU talks about the well owner, right? So that would be the property owner, I would assume, but does that preclude us from providing bottled water as a short-term solution? Or
Even if it's a tenant?
Yeah, if it's a tenant, then we could track down the owner over time to address the well.
Okay, I was wondering if that would be like the bridge to that gap. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're gonna provide some water from a health and safety standpoint.
Right. So again, I put this as an action item for our board, just for our TAC to say, do you think we're taking the right direction? Again, as you see, it's a work in progress and we're gonna keep on working on this and get done by the end of the calendar year, right? So more to come, more to work on. But showing DWR, look, this is kind of where we're going on this. These are our goals. We're gonna fund it and we'll get this done by, date certain and we'll be good to go. I think that's a strong approach to DWR.
So are you saying we're not gonna reach the 180-day deadline for the resubmittal? Is that what I'm understanding?
This plan.
Just so I can tell the board.
Yeah, so this plan will be shown as a draft.
The
Okay.
GSP revision
Will be done.
but this,
GSP
but this
revision.
inside
Okay.
of it.
Okay, just check. Okay.
Yeah, this program is part of that revision and from our conversations with DWR, they're okay if you have work products or works in progress, that your GSP, we commit to finishing this up by a certain date and getting it done. They're totally fine with that. Because they realize 180 days, you can't get all these things done. But they want a commitment, date certain, you're gonna get these things done.
Okay.
And we have, as Iris mentioned, we have a meeting at 1 o'clock on Thursday with our DWR rep. We're gonna show them this,
Yeah.
what we're working on, what our game plan is, just to make sure that passes muster. And if he says, heck no, I need to see that thing done by July 16th, we'll get it done by July 16th. I think rushing might be a mistake.
What would be the approach? I mean, obviously, there's gonna be probably some wells that are kind of like the low hanging fruit that are real easy, maybe rehab, clean the casing or whatever, and some that are more complicated.
Right.
So, I mean, right.
They have to be re-drilled, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the concept of partial mitigation is someone has plenty of water, but they have lower production. And we get there, it's like your motor's 60 years old. That's your problem. Is that really then the GSA's responsibility to fix an old motor when there's plenty of water in the well? They just can't get it out, right? And so those are the things we'll follow up on. Okay. Any questions over there in Belico? Or sorry, Cortez? Not saying anybody.
I think we're good.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Iris. So is it okay if we take an action from you guys to say you think we're moving in the right direction? Anybody throwing up over anything right now? Again, we're not making any decisions today that we can't modify over time, right? I just want to make sure, again, I think for DWR, checking the boxes, we're moving forward on working on something. So I have a recommended action to the West Turlock TAC regarding the preferred direction of the domestic well mitigation plan. And this is the preferred direction right now.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
Mike makes a motion,
Second.
second by David. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, West Turlock will good with the overall framework we have right now. East Turlock, you gonna make a motion too?
East Turlock, want to do that? I mean, are you hearing things that you generally think are headed in the right direction?
Yeah.
I can make a motion.
I'll
It's
second.
Christie.
And so it's been moved and seconded to proceed.
All those in favor?
Any discussion?
Oh, sorry.
Discussion,
Mhm.
Okay,
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passed.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Okay, moving on to item number 8, Sigma related updates. It's an opportunity for TAC members to discuss and provide updates on general issues related to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. No action on these items. Is there any just general updates? We're very busy, as you can tell. Revisions to the GSP. Any other general things for anybody? Anything over in Cortez?
yeah, so just so you're aware, we're working on our overdraft reduction plan. The first part of that you're going to see is a draft action matrix. And we propose to discuss that with Shane on Thursday. And I'll send out a copy to you, Michael, in advance of that meeting and to our consulting team. If I'm assuming we're having our consulting team join as well.
Perfect. So as Mike mentioned, we're kind of showing our caseworker from DWR on Thursday what we're working on. Hopefully getting his blessing, and then pretty much got like 30 days then to put everything together and then get a draft out for about 30 days and then get it approved by our board. So we're about 2 months out from getting this whole thing wrapped up. So a lot of work to do, but a lot of work's been done. So I see that very positive. Okay, so next meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee is Tuesday, June 11th at 2 p.m. Hope to see everybody here, because that'll be kind of the culmination of a lot of work. So hope to see you guys here, any input you have. And if we have work products we want you to see beforehand, we'll get those out, have you guys take a look before the meeting. So I don't, put everything on the burden at the meeting there, particularly if we're going to make some tough decisions. But I don't think we will at this point. Okay, so with that, see you guys on June 11th. And so for West Turlock, I'll take a motion for adjournment. Andrew for motion, second. Second by Juan. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned in West Turlock. East Turlock.
Motion to adjourn?
I can make the motion to adjourn. I'll second. All those in favor?
Yeah, all in favor, go adjourn.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, we stand
We're
adjourned.
adjourned.
That took longer
Thanks,
than
everybody.
usual.
See you next time.
Heard you,
Thank you.
stuff. All right. So is West Ham gonna